Bob Herbert's OpEd.tv is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation with the support of Ann Ulnick.
Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. Haiti can seem like a country that is cursed. It's the poorest nation in our hemisphere and has long been beset by political instability, natural disasters, and stunning outbreaks of violence. The president of Haiti was assassinated in July. That was soon followed by an earthquake that killed more than 2,000 people. Haitians fleeing their home country for one reason or another have contributed to a surge of migration into the United States, and that has created a political crisis for the Biden administration. We'll talk about all of this with my guest, Jocelyn McCalla, a longtime human rights activist with a special focus on Haiti. Jocelyn, welcome. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a great pleasure, Bob, to be speaking to you about Haiti once again.
I agree. We're old friends and go back to crises that were occurring in Haiti back in the 1980s. And of course, you've been following it for much longer than that. American officials have apologized for the recent treatment of some Haitian migrants on the US border. The photos of Border Patrol agents on horseback chasing and corralling men and women, and I guess in some cases children, caused a lot of outrage and embarrassed the United States. Can you talk a little bit about some of the conditions back in Haiti now that have caused so many individuals and families to flee?
Well, unfortunately, conditions have worsened for the last 10 years, actually, because as you may remember, in 2010, Haiti suffered one of the largest earthquakes in this hemisphere. Estimates vary between 150,000 to 200,000 people died as a result of the earthquake, primarily in the capital city of Port-au-Prince. The entire government, its own infrastructure was destroyed to the point that the then president said, well, my palace has collapsed. It was President Préval who said that. And the world poured in, but the world responded in a major way, promised to build Haiti back better. Unfortunately, the international community led by the United States did not build Haiti back better. As a result of it, as a result of the catastrophe that happened and the fact that there were political turmoil throughout that time, many young Haitians were moved to emigrate from Haiti, primarily because, well, down in Latin America and Brazil in particular, and Chile, there were lots of demand for labor. Brazil was going to be hosting the Olympics, the soccer Olympics. He needed to build a lot of stadiums down there, and the Haitian willingly said, hey, man, this is an opportunity for us to earn a living and perhaps to send remittances back to our family in Haiti so that they can be a little better. Now, that was about 10 years ago, and then the Olympics were held, building construction boom faded out, and now the Haitians are homeless and basically jobless.
Right.
They migrated, they started to move from Latin America, from deep down Latin America, from Chile, up to Central America, up to Mexico, back in 2014, 2015. Many of them ended up on the southern border in Tijuana. So the kind of images that we've seen this past month of Haitians crossing the Rio Grande and getting to Del Rio, and are in fact a repetition, unfortunately, of what they suffered 5 or 6 years ago. Unfortunately, the United States response under President Trump was to essentially say, hey, man, these people are coming from a country that is, I mean, I'm not going to even say it.
Yeah,
But
his terminology.
yeah, because I refuse to characterize Haiti in such a way. I think Haiti is a beautiful country that has been maligned since its independence in 1804. And unfortunately, that's the situation that we have. We have a situation in which many Haitians are migrating from Haiti, are trying to seek safe haven elsewhere, and they're all over the place in Central America and Latin America and the United States and so on.
You know, I think you made an important point. You were talking about Haiti being a beautiful country. I mean, whenever Haiti's in the news, it's always because it seems like something terrible has happened. And people who don't know Haiti can just believe that, you know, this is a place that's sort of racked with problems and a place to stay away from. You know, I loved Haiti. When I was traveling to Haiti, that was back when I was at the Daily News. I loved it. Many parts of the country were unbelievably beautiful. The people were fabulous. I remember that one of the things that I especially loved was outdoor art was all over the place. You know, so even though we're talking about tons of problems that have to be dealt with, it can create the wrong impression. Haiti is just really a fantastic place, even though it may sound paradoxical. So it seems to me that many of the migrants that are coming now are coming to the U.S. because they believe that the immigration policies here would be more benign under President Biden than under Trump. Nevertheless, many Haitians are being sent back to their home country. They're being deported. What should our policy be with regard to Haitian migrants?
Well, the United States has a very long history of dealing with asylum, and throughout that history, it has, well, I mean, for the Haitians, it has been a very negative response. Ever since back in 1972, when the first boatload of Haitians in the Washoe Shores in Florida. But you know, since 1972, there have been efforts by successive administration to adopt or to develop a process that takes into account the fact that the United States did say, hey, you know, we have to honor the right of people to seek asylum on our shores, and therefore we should take a process. So the process includes a two-step process. First, when the asylum officers are basically empowered to figure out whether or not the person who is seeking asylum has a credible fear of persecution if returned to Haiti. That's the first step. If they find that person to have credible fear, then that person gets to claim asylum outright or pursue the asylum claims outright and in the United States with the assistance of an attorney and with the necessary community support. In some cases, these people are given work permit. Under Trump, they were not given work permits, so they could not fend for themselves. They were essentially a burden to family and relatives and community organizations that supported them. So the response to your question is that the Biden administration should follow the credible fear process, and essentially saying, hey, you know, we will process you so that we can ascertain whether you have a credible fear of persecution. If you do, we should welcome you into the country so that you can pursue the asylum claim. If you don't, given the situation that exists currently in Haiti, what we should do is trigger what is called deferred enforcement departure. In other words, we'll give you an opportunity to stay in the United States because we understand that the situation in Haiti is so chaotic, so violent, and so politically unstable that it will put your life in danger. That's what they should have said, should have done. They didn't do that. So as a result, some almost 10,000 people have already been returned to Haiti. I mean, and what? Let me rephrase that. The Biden administration is hiding the number of people who have been returned to Haiti. It claims that I've seen various figures that don't really make any sense at this point.
So that question had to do with migrants, asylum seekers coming to the United States. In a broader sense, the United States for many, many long decades has been involved and often deeply involved in Haitian affairs in Haiti. The United States has invaded Haiti. For several years, it occupied Haiti. Former President Clinton felt compelled to apologize for a policy that required Haiti to scrap tariffs on agricultural imports, and that ended up ruining virtually all of rice farming in Haiti. So there's a long list of things that where the United States has contributed mightily to some of the most severe problems in Haiti. Given that history, what obligation do you think the U.S. has to take steps to try and right some of the wrongs and bring about more of a sense of economic and political stability in Haiti?
Beyond the interference of the United States, one of the things the United States has to recognize that, frankly, thanks to the slaves who fought French colonialism back 200 years ago, more than 200 years ago, the United States vastly increased its territory when the Napoleon Bonaparte sold the Louisiana territories to the United States.
Right.
And Bonaparte sold the Louisiana territories because Haiti at that point, the colony of Saint-Domingue, which was its name then, was producing so much wealth that Bonaparte basically said, we'd rather keep Haiti than the Louisiana territories because we could not manage them. So as a result, the United States became very powerful in North America.
It radically expanded the size of the country.
Oh, absolutely. So to some extent, Haiti is to some extent a contributor to the extreme wealth the United States now enjoys, throughout the world.
Right.
Second thing is, obviously, Haiti has been maligned primarily because, frankly, when the United States became independent, it decided not to end slavery itself. So slavery continued until in the 1860s, when the Civil War solved that problem for the United States. But still, the Haitians were being seen as a threat to the slave plantations. So what I think the United States owes Haiti owes Haiti quite a bit. It failed in the last 10 years when President Clinton led the international effort to rebuild Haiti. Now he failed to do that, in a manner that was really productive. Even though he apologized for the fact that during his presidency, he favored rice-growing farmers in the United States over rice-growing farmers in Haiti, and essentially, as you say, kill that economy itself. Fact is that there should be much more that could be done by the United States. One of which has to do with, frankly, the United States has a wealth of Haitian Americans, some of whom are very high up in the private sector and in the public sector. These people are not being very, very much used in basically saying, okay, how can you and we join together so that we can do something that's terrific for the country? Haiti, as you know, and as you know, it is a beautiful country. In fact, its wealth of historical monuments overwhelms anything else in the Caribbean. Its topography is absolutely wonderful. I think that even though it is always being cast as the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, I do agree with the Haitians to say the country is not poor. It has been plundered. It's still very beautiful, and it still has many resources. All it takes is really a leadership that is forward thinking and forward looking, and that's what's needed. So instead of the United States allying itself with conservative right wing folks who are just care about making a huge profit off of the back of Haitians, it should side with Haitians who want to basically bring their country forward, and they could do it in, I would say, in 2 generations or so.
Now, I first went to Haiti, as I mentioned, back in the 80s to cover the ouster of Jean-Claude Duvalier, Baby Doc, who was the dictator and who was the son of Francois Duvalier, Papa Doc. And both of them were these brutal, rapacious, corrupt, thieving dictators who had a profound effect on life in Haiti. So can you talk a little bit about what the Duvaliers did to Haiti and how the impact of their reign still resonates there?
Well, Francois Papa Doc Duvalier became president of the country in 1957. But 3 to 4 years later, he decided that he was going to call himself president for life, and develop quite a roster of things to ensure that the Haitians understood that he was the supreme commander of the land, and so on. One of which included essentially taking over a lot of private businesses, the telephone company, the electricity company, the waterfront companies that were involved in the export business. And he made sure that if you were a dissident, that you would not be able to live in the country peacefully. You would not be able to contest or challenge the president. So he established a really violent regime, enroll what eventually became known as the Tonto Macoutes, which were about 30,000 to 40,000 people all over the country, who were given free rein to kill, maim, seize property, as long as they remain loyal to Duvalier. That was Duvalier's attempt, allegedly, to create a black middle class in the country. Duvalier, Francois Duvalier died in 1971, but he made sure before he died that his son, who came to be known as Baby Doc, and was at the time 18 years old, succeeded him. So Baby Doc ruled the country from 1971 to 1986, when he was finally kicked out of office. During the time, Haiti became poorer and poorer. The country, because Duvalier siphoned off the treasury, it essentially set the precedent that continues to be the way that people in power use government. He siphoned off the treasury, amassed millions of dollars, stashed them in secret bank accounts abroad, and they only allowed people who were loyal to them to make money. Some of whom they needed in order to make money out of it. The United States, unfortunately, back in '69, decided that, well, Duvalier may be a dictator, but he's our dictator. And essentially, back in '69, Vice President Nelson Rockefeller at the time visited Haiti, Francois Duvalier, and essentially declared that the United States was going to turn Haiti into Taiwan and the Caribbean, but that never happened. What it did was to make sure that U.S. companies then were able to exploit cheap labor, in the manufacturing industry, and that because the focus was in manufacturing industry, assembly industry, then everything that had to do with agriculture did not get the kind of support that it needed at the time.
which resulted not just in poverty but in hunger in much of Haiti.
And migration.
Right, and migration, right.
So internal migration from the countryside to the cities, the external migration to the Dominican Republic, the external migration to the Bahamas, the other parts of the Caribbean, eventually United States.
You were born in Haiti and spent a significant portion of your childhood there. When did you leave, and under what circumstances? Why did you leave?
Well, I mean, I was young, and I was 13 when I left Haiti. The circumstances are the following. My mother, who had become a single woman, a single mother, could not sustain the entire family. When we're talking about the entire family, we're not just, she had 3 children, but then, everybody else in the family depended on her. So she migrated as a permanent resident to the United States in '65, 3 years with about $60 in the back pocket, which she had borrowed.
Wow.
She eventually, 3 years later, had earned enough money working 2 or 3 jobs.
You were here in New York?
Yeah, to send for us. So we arrived in New York in 1968, and from 1968 on, and I've lived in New York, except for a brief period when I live in Africa.
So, I mentioned that often in the news we're talking about, one bad thing or another, one difficulty or another that Haiti has to deal with. You've been engaged in human rights activism with regard to Haiti for several decades now. You created an organization. I'm going to get the Haitian Refugees Organization. Give us the exact title, the exact name.
Well, I did not create that organization.
Oh, I thought you created it. I know you headed it.
Well, I headed it, yes, in 1988. I became its executive director. But the National Coalition for Haitian
Refugees
was born in 1982, and it was a coalition of groups from Haitian American groups, as well as most of the major civil rights, labor rights, and religious organizations in the United States. So it included anybody who was anybody there back in 1982, because it rose up because at the time Reagan, who was president, decided that he was going to do 3 things that were essentially saying to Black Americans in this country, hey, I am going to roll back whatever progress you've made, in the past 15 or 20 years or so. So what he did for the Haitians, that basically said any Haitian who set foot in the United States will be detained indefinitely in various parts of the country, as far away as Arkansas or West Virginia, and nowhere, any places where there are no Haitian communities. That's where we're going to put you. But he made the mistake of putting them in New York City as well. The second thing he says is that for the purposes of immigration, U.S. territorial waters, which were then 12-mile, had a 12-mile limit. He said, for the purposes of immigration, we're going to narrow U.S. territory to 3 miles offshore. So in other words, the Haitians had to really become close to the United States in order to access due process protection. And then he said, listen, we're going to try to prevent them from being there. So we're going to have a flotilla of Coast Guard vessels on the high seas to stop them from even getting near that 3-mile water limit.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what he did. So the 1982, so a lot of the civil rights organizations said, hey, no way, man. We are, we had the 1965 Civil Rights Act. There is basically the same thing that they're doing to the Haitians. They're rolling back progress. We're not going to stand for that. And so that's how the coalition was born.
They want to go. They want to go back to the old destructive ways.
Correct.
It's really tragic.
And And that we've seen with Trump, we've seen
Exactly.
how far back they want to get this back.
That's right. We've run out of time, so we have to stop there. Thank you, Jocelyn McCullough, for being our guest. I really appreciate it. To our viewers, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.